Any questions?
What would it do today?
The cancer culture would have cut them off at the knees.
Off at the knees. Right.
It is amazing what a very wealthy teenager can do.
We need one now.
He had developed a conscience and morals, and the way he had deprived of a father, deprived of a mother, growing up in a rural area, living with peasants. He was a basic individual. He wanted glory, just like a lot of other Europeans at the time. If you're a soldier, or if you're in a military family, you're not going to go anywhere unless your country's in a war. And if your country's not in a war, you go find a country that is, and you volunteer. There were a lot of Poles that volunteered. Kosciuszko and Kossuth, and there's names up and down the eastern seaboard of places and things for them. They became military engineers or surveyors or whatever.
There was a group, I know I'm interrupting, but, excuse me, but there's a group, there were 6 men here from Poland 2 weeks ago, and they were working at BMW. And we got into a conversation at a restaurant, and they knew so much American history and what Poland had done. I mean, they names and dates, and it was incredible that what they had done for the United States, and just what you were saying. But we don't know that.
Well, you think back to the 30s. You had the adventurers and volunteers that got involved in the Spanish Civil War to fight fascism. There have always been people who've gone off to be in the war of the time, because that's where the action was. And sometimes they chose the good side, sometimes they chose the bad side. But it's a constant. If you're a military man, you go where the war's are.
It's amazing that you said that, because they had talked all about just what Poland had done, and all those names, but no one has ever come to help Poland.
We didn't do it all alone.
Oh, right.
We couldn't have.
Up in Morristown, New Jersey, is Washington's headquarters at the Ford Mansion.
Yeah.
And that's where that's when Lafayette, when he came back from France, and when he went to tell George Washington that the army was coming.
Yeah.
And that's where he met him. And also, I've been to a place in New Jersey where there was a sign there where the French soldiers camped.
Yeah.
And that was interesting.
As I say, there are a lot of influences that beyond, a lot of factors involved contributing to the success of the war, and the French were a big part, and the individual Frenchmen and Poles, and I'm trying to think of some of the other countries that joined in.
Did the French soldiers primarily wear white uniforms?
Basically, the French typically wore a white uniform, and they had a different construction of the lapel. It kind of bowed in and came out. It was you could always tell. And they had tassels. Was it the French? No, the Germans had the tassels, but I think the French also had the tassels on the sides of their tricone. But yeah, they wore a white uniform. By the end of the war, by the last couple of years of the war, Washington had come to realize that the regimental coat was essentially impractical, and it was only used in the winter. This would be a light infantryman, a black man. There were black regiments, except in the South. That regimental coat, you notice it's cut a little short, and he's wearing the helmet. That tells me he's a light infantryman. The regular soldier's coat would go almost to the knee. The regular soldier's coat, see these little white turnbacks? On a regular soldier's coat, those were flaps that could be let down, so it was like a trench coat. Or buttoned back like that as flaps. Of the light infantryman, it was sewn in place. It couldn't be dropped down. In the winter, the small clothes, the overalls, as they were called, or sliders, the one-length trouser with the gaiter on the bottom, and the waistcoat, the vest, they were made of wool for winter. And in summer, they were made of linen. The, until the modern times, till 20th century, a child grew up and spent all his life wearing hand-me-downs. You wear your older brother's stuff, and if you were the oldest brother, the oldest son, you wore your father's cast-offs. A new suit of clothes was one of the main inducements to enlistment in the British Army or any army, because, wow, I got my own suit of clothes that nobody ever wore before me, and look, it's a fancy bright color, red, blue, green, whatever. It was bait, okay? That's the way they got you to enlist. But it wasn't practical, nor was the helmet, or the hat, the tri-coated hat. It was fashionable. What Washington came to realize is that what's called a rifle frock, it's just like a bathrobe with a cape made of linen. It was so much more practical. And what happened is the men had regimental coats like that, but they also had rifle coats in their knapsack. They would wear those most of the time, except for formal parades and stuff. It was a much more practical outfit. It's what you see the riflemen and the militiamen dressed in up here, that with the fringe on it. You've seen that. But this would be a light infantryman before Lafayette got back and gave him his black-tipped red turkey feather plume. And that is a Charleville musket in the illustration. Whoever did this knew what he was doing. This happens to be a 6th Connecticut Regiment, 1780.
How long is that? I mean, the musket, how long is that?
That's the musket,
I mean,
with the bayonet on it.
it looks really long though. I mean, come on.
Well, come on up here and see how long it is. Come on.
You know, how long it is.
There we go, there we go, there we go. We can do
But
it.
it looks, maybe he was short. It looks,
Well, keep in
you
mind,
know, you put that on.
soldiers from the enlistment rolls,
Well, that is long.
soldiers in that day went from 16 to 60.
Yeah, well, that is quite long, isn't it? Yeah.
That's cadet.
When
Now.
is this?
Next
Is it heavy?
Thursday.
Talk about 6 feet social distancing,
Okay.
okay?
Alright.
All right.
Information to me.
Yep.
You want me running at you with
No,
that?
I don't think
Just,
so.
Okay? Screaming and running?
Oh,
Ah!
oh.
And
She said no, she changed
in those
her mind.
days, the bayonet wasn't a sword or a knife. You notice it's triangular.
We're gonna have to get together.
It made a wound that a surgeon can't really stitch up.
Oh, really?
That has been outlawed by the Geneva Convention.
Really?
No
But I think it
triangle.
looked a little sharp.
It doesn't have to be sharp.
Yeah.
You could sharpen it, but if I just jam that into you, it'd
It
go.
would work.
It would work. I mean, that would work. Jam that into you could jam that into a side of beef, right?
It's kind of heavy too.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's heavy.
Here, you want heavy.
Oh, that's what oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. And they ran with this?
Yeah. And another 60 pounds on their back.
Oh. my
You know, their food, their
That's
water,
heavy.
their
And
ammunition.
that's the heavier.
Did the American militia, ready to issue the Charlottesville?
No, they weren't issued anything.
American
They
militia?
would capture whatever, they would grab whatever they could off the dead on the battlefield. They might have a brown vest that was left over from the French and Indian War. That was issued to them by the state. They might have
Okay, so it's gonna
a
be.
homemade musket, you know, some local gunsmith's
Jailman.
production. They might have something that they, like I said, grabbed on the battlefield. More
Thursday,
likely,
you said?
What is next Thursday?
this is the equivalent of a shotgun.
Yeah.
It's the same size barrel, the brown bass, as a 12-gauge shotgun.
Okay.
And if you're a farmer and you wanted to go hunt ducks or geese or pheasant,
I got it.
what you did is you poured a little powder in, then you poured a handful of little BBs in, and then you put a piece of paper on top and the ramrod, and then boom, bang, okay?
Okay, I'm leaving the 24th.
If you were hunting something big like a deer,
I think that's
you
the
pour a little
first.
powder
But
in,
that's
you
okay,
pour a
I can
round
still
musket
write
ball
it up and
in,
it can be published anytime.
Tamp that
It
down.
can be published anytime.
bang.
I just have
Big
to
hole
know
in
what
the
the
deer.
title of it
It's
is.
like firing a shotgun slug as opposed to buckshot, if you know what's going on. If you were a marksman, if you were hunting squirrels and wild
I
turkeys
gotta
and stuff
get
like
some
that,
information.
this wouldn't do it. You had a rifle. Now, the rifles were all custom made by gunsmiths, there were no factory production of them. Their barrel
Who else would-
was not thin like this, it was heavy, thick wall, and it had grooves spiraling down the barrel. That's called rifling. What that did, it's the same thing as when you throw a football. If you throw the
Society
football
of-
without a spin on it, you go kind of
Of.
wobbles. But if you put a spin on it, it goes
Of.
really far and fast and straight. The spinning makes the bullet more true. But to do that, the
This
technology of
is an
loading the gun.
award. It goes to,
Military,
well, how are
paper
they,
cartridge.
how are they selected?
In the bottom would be the ball, the round ball. And the top is powder. It's about the same granulation as sugar, only it's black, charcoal black. The only requirement to be a soldier was that you have two teeth, one opposite the other. Because to
Okay,
load the
all that good
musket,
stuff. What's the
because to
name of the
load the
guy at
musket, you
Jail
had
Man?
to tear the top of the paper cartridge off. You would pour the paper,
Yeah, well, who's,
you would pour a
Colonel
little
somebody
bit,
or-
a little bit of the powder out here in what's called the pan. See that little hole there?
Last name is
You pour a little bit there and close that cover.
O-X-I-T, Hawks.
Then you turn it around, pour the rest of it down the
all
barrel.
right, I'll find
Then
it.
crumple the paper around the
I'll
ball,
find it.
put it in the barrel,
But if
the
it would be
ramrod out,
published, if you get it
put it all the way
in there
down,
after the
and then I'll go
ceremony.
to full cup.
You know, like a
Now, what would happen is, this is flint.
Okay. I'm
That'll
up for
scrape
Jail Man anyway.
A sliver of steel here, and I'll make a spark.
Good to see
The
you.
spark will fall on this powder, and there's a hole into the barrel, and it'll light it up. And it'll go click, whoosh, boom. Did you see the sparks? Did you see the sparks?
Oh, no, because I was,
He's saying.
She ain't gonna go off and make sparks. See the
Oh, I
sparks?
did, yes, I did.
Okay.
Ah,
Now, a good, well-trained infantryman could do that in about 4 times in a minute.
well, it's nice to see you. I
Okay.
recognize you,
But meanwhile,
whenever we used to.
you're facing, a line of troops.
Take care of yourself.
And if you fire
I've
it
been
80
trying
yards
to.
away, 80 yards away, okay?
Problem.
It's a long way.
oh,
You might hit one of them.
Well, I was born and
Okay.
raised in Johnstown.
10 guys firing at 10 guys.
Lived in
The
Philadelphia.
10 of you firing, you might put one man down at that time.
Oh, okay.
Now meanwhile, you're doing the reload in a minute. Now they're 50 yards away.
You're being very lazy.
The 10 of you fire again.
Okay, be good.
You might put 2 men down. These aren't sights, that's just the bayonet lug. There's no sight on this. The Germans trained their troops. They didn't even look down the barrel of the gun. The Germans fired like this, and the officer at the end of the line would hold up his cane and tell them how high to lay him up.
oh, yes.
It didn't make a difference whether you're in left or right, because there's 100 guys lined up, okay? You fire now, they're still marching at 60 yards. What did I say, 60? All right. You fire again, the 10 of you might knock down 2. Now, there's still 7 guys. You're frantically reloading. They're now at 30 yards and running at you with a bayonet. You fire, you've got an unloaded gun. They're running at you, you're standing still. What do?
Look.
Right? Toward the nearest tree.
That was cute.
Now, a rifleman, it was a precision instrument like a sniper. He would take, pretend it's a rifle. This mechanism is the same. First of all, it's a lot lighter. The barrel's just as heavy, but the rest of it's a lot lighter. He would take and judge the distance, judge the wind, think about the moisture and the temperature, because that all affected the powder. And he would estimate, I need this much powder to get that ball 80 yards, or 100 yards, or 400 yards. There are documented shots of 400 yards, incredible as that seems. 4 football fields. That's incredible with a modern rifle. And they would judge, we need 80 grains of powder. You pour 80 grains, measure 80 grains of powder in. Then he would take a linen patch that had been greased with tallow or lard, put it on top, then take the ball, put it in, and he'd have a little starter to get it going, because it would be a tight fit, because it has to engage those spiral grooves, right? Then he would push it a little more, then he'd take the ramrod out, push it all the way down. It would take him almost a minute and a half. Take him about a minute and a half. But when he shot, he hit what he wanted to. You couldn't put a bayonet on a rifle, because they were all different sizes, octagon barrels, round barrels, they weren't standardized. So they were not line troops. And finally Daniel Morgan got Washington to realize, don't use them as line troops. Use them as snipers, use them as flankers, use them as scouts, because they're good at that. So you had two different technologies based on the weapon. And that's how that. Any questions? How far do we go?
It's very,
Oh wow, just about an hour.
it's very interesting on Lafayette.
Isn't he an interesting man?
Yeah,
He's forgotten.
I didn't know all that.
If it's interesting, if you ever get the chance, I have it here. It's a long document, it's almost like the Declaration of Independence. But the Declaration of the Rights of Man, you can see where Jefferson was, well, it's said that the preamble to the Declaration of Independence is a good summation of enlightened thought. All of the political thinkers of the time, Locke, Montesquieu, all of the big thinkers of the time, Jefferson distills. It's not so much original, but it's his taking it and distilling it into this simple document that explains what our government is supposed to be, what this country is founded. It's the only country founded on an idea. If you stop and think about it, other countries are founded on tribal affiliations.
Yeah.
In the 50th anniversary when he came over here,
Yeah.
where did he go to in South Carolina?
I don't know, but he had all 24 of the states at the time.
He did come to South Carolina.
He did come to South Carolina, yeah. Because that's where he met, was it South, no, it was Virginia where he met Armistead. Yeah. Yeah, he did come to South Carolina. He didn't get here during the war.
Right.
But he and Lawrence, and who was the third one? Lafayette, Lawrence, and I think it was Greene, and this McGonigal, the black spy from New York City. They're the four people that are around Hamilton. No, that's what it was. It wasn't Greene. It was Hamilton, Lafayette, Lawrence, and McGonigal. They're the four that are the main characters in the stage play Hamilton, if you've ever seen it. It's hip hop, and it's hard to follow, but they get the history pretty damn good.
Also, there was a light infantry from New Jersey regiment that attacked Redoubt number 10.
No,
Or
No.
Redoubt number 9.
no.
What was the controversy?
The lineup.
The play Hamilton. Was there not controversy about that?
I don't know what the controversy was.
Oh, okay.
The fact that it was hip hop probably got it.
Maybe that was
Okay.
it, I don't know.
The light infantry at Yorktown in 1781. Lafayette, 2 brigades. The 1st Brigade, Muhlenberg, made up of 3 battalions. Voss's battalion and William Galvin, he was one of the French volunteers that came over with Lafayette on that ship's voyage. The light infantry companies are the 1st through 8th Massachusetts regiments. Gimas battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Jean-Joseph Soubadier de Gimas. He was a French volunteer and a former aide-de-camp to Lafayette. He was one of the Frenchmen that came over on the boat with Lafayette. And it's the light infantry company of the 9th and 10th Massachusetts, that's me. 2nd Rhode Island, 1st through 5th Connecticut regiments. And Captain Stephen Olney, commanding the company from the 2nd Rhode Island Regiment, he led the force into Redoubt 10. Barber's Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Barber, 1st New Jersey.
That's who, yeah.
That's who he was from. He had the light infantry companies of the 1st and 2nd New Hampshire, 1st and 2nd New Jersey, plus 3 regiments of the Jersey line.
That's what I'm saying, there was New Jersey troops.
He didn't lead. It was Gimas' battalion that led, and it was Captain Stephen Olney's company, the Rhode Island company that led. It was 400 men. It was Gimas' battalion. Those were the 400. The 2nd Brigade, Moses Hazen's brigade, 3 battalions. Canadian Regiment, Scammell's Light Infantry Corps, and companies, three provisional light infantry companies from Connecticut, 3 from Massachusetts and 2 from New Hampshire, plus Hamilton's battalion, light infantry companies of the 1st and 2nd New York regiments, plus 2 provisional companies from Connecticut. Hamilton wanted the honor, Lafayette wanted the honor, but Hamilton by rotation was the officer of the day for the regiment. So he technically led the assault on Redoubt 10 under Lafayette's command of the division, but it was Jamar's battalion and Stephen Olney's light company. That is the way it formed out.
And Lafayette too was one of Washington's aide de camps, right?
If you want more on that, I'll be glad to sit with anybody who wants more. The assault on Redoubt 10, 1781, please, if you're tired and bored, I understand.
I'm not bored,
I'm-
I'm having sleepy all day.
I'm just into this stuff.
We have to get up at 3:30, 4 o'clock.